As you may know, there was a chaos erupted in the House of Commons on Wednesday, the 21st of February to be exact. In this video I will try to explain what went wrong and what was going on. I will mainly focus on the parliamentary procedure and not about the motion related to this. It's the topic of another day, although it may be mentioned if it is related to the main topic. I will start from basic knowledge about the procedure to more advanced and complicated matter, and finally putting it to practice so we can appreciate the context of the event. This is a footage during the incident. You may notice some key people. Here you can see the Leader of the House, Penny Mordaunt. On the chair, you can see the Deputy Speaker, Dame Rosie Winterton, who presided during this turmoil. You may even notice the former leader of the SNP in Westminster, Ian Blackford. Before we move on any further, I expect you to have some basic knowledge about the Parliament and some jargons. I can't go back to absolute basic because it's gonna take so long to finish. So at least, please know what these words mean and also their role. A simple Google search or asking ChatGPT should suffice. Speaker. Government. Opposition. The Leader of the House. Whip. Frontbencher. Backbencher. The voting procedure. Standing order. I am going to talk about this in later slides, but it's gonna be very briefly. You don't have to know each and every standing order numbers, but at least know what it is and what is the use of it. In this video today, there are three main things I want to talk about, so that we also understand each other when parliamentary jargons are used. First, I want to talk about the motion. I know that this is very basic and should be included as an expectation on the last slide, but I want to make sure that we understand what it is, so we do not get confused when we delve deeper. Second, I want to talk about amendment. Again, it's very basic, but it's one of the concepts that led to the chaos. I really want to make sure that we really know its meaning and its procedure, because understanding the process of moving amendment will make us understand why the Standing Order number 31, 2A, was there at the first place. Third, I want to talk about the Opposition Day and the Standing Order number 31, which is the main culprit of this chaos. When the House meets to debate, there must be a subject matter. The debate can't be without objective and purpose. This is not Coffee Cafe. You can't just debate out of thin air. Basically, this may not be 100% factually correct, but the subject of the debate is basically called a motion. And down below here is the official definition of motion, given by UK Parliament. A motion is a proposal put forward for debate or decision in the House of Commons or House of Lords. A motion must be proposed, moved, before any debate or vote can take place in Parliament. Please note that the House doesn't meet solely to just only debate. There can be other things going on as well, for example, personal statement or ministerial statement, or question time. The most popular question time is Prime Minister's question every Wednesday when the House is sitting. But other departments are also responsible to answer the question, such as question to the Home Secretary or business question to the Leader of the House. Now I would like to divide motion into two categories. It's either general or substantial. However, I think it would be more correct to divide it into general or not general, because as you can see below there are other kinds of motion as well. It's not general because it's call for certain action, but generally people would not call it substantial either. So, this may not be 100% factually correct, but I do it for the purpose of making an explanation easier. We are going to explore the meaning of general and substantial motion in subsequent slides. But for now note that general motion is neutrally worded and do not explicitly call for action or express any opinion or commitment in the motion wording. Substantial motion is a motion to call for action and or express opinion, commitment, etc. I am not going to focus much on general motion. The thing to concern today is the Opposition Day motion, which is substantial motion. I just want all of us to get and see the big picture. I am gonna go through the list here down below in case any of you are curious. These motions are definitely not general because it asks or force the House to do an action, but it may not completely fit the meaning, Definition and requirement of substantive motion either. Legislation motion is a motion to make law, for example, that the bill be now read for a third time. Procedural motion is a motion related to a procedure, for example, that this House do now sit in private. I am not going to talk about early day motion, just for you to know that it exists. In fact, after and during the chaos, Tory and SNP MPs have tabled an early day motion that the House has no confidence in Mr. Speaker. But this is the effect of the chaos, which we are not going to deal with today. I mainly want to talk about the cause of it. Dilatory motion is the motion to interrupt the business of the House, for example, that the debate do now adjourn. Ways and means motion is basically a budget motion, not gonna talk today. Adjournment motion is an example of dilatory motion, but it can also be used in adjournment debate. Confidence motion is an example of substantial motion, but it is so special and extraordinary. If the House passed the motion that this House has no confidence in the government, it seriously raised the concern on government competency and their capability to govern any longer. By convention, the government must either resign or ask His Majesty to dissolve the Parliament and call for a general election. If you are confused or don't understand, it is okay, it is not important today. General debates or consider neutrally worded motions that usually begin, that this House has considered. They let MPs debate a subject without committing the House to an opinion or course of action. General motion upon the main chamber can't be amended. MPs can vote for or against them, but most of the time the MP will vote for it because it does not express opinion whatsoever. And it's not gonna be any difference if they vote for or against it. Example of a general motion is this House has considered AI. This House has considered lung cancer in the UK. This House has considered agricultural industry. Basically, when the motion it just mean that we have talked about certain thing and going to move on without calling for action. During the debate, since it is general motion, let's say MPs are debating on the motion that this House has considered AI. MPs can talk for the use of AI, another MPs can talk against the use of AI, another MPs can talk about both pros and cons. Now substantive motion. A motion is substantive if it calls for action or expresses an opinion. And as you can see the example set here, it is a lot different from the general motion that we just talked about. This House believes that AI is a threat to humanity and will do anything it takes to stop it, starting by urging government to bring in legislation to ban the use of AI in the UK. And here from Erskine May, as known as Parliament Bible, set out the meaning of substantive motion in a more accurate way than mine. If you are interested, you can pause and read it. Here are more examples of substantive motion. This House condemns the government for its management of the NHS, highlighting deteriorating conditions, longer waiting times, and a decline in patient care quality. This House loves to eat oranges. These two are going to be my dummy motion that I am going to use to explain the procedure later. So, how can MPs get the motion to be debated in the main chamber of the House of Commons? There are 3 ways to get substantive motion into the House. Firstly, collectively as a government. Government can table their motion and allocate time for it to be debated. Secondly, and it is the matter of our concern today, is that it can be tabled by the opposition in allotted opposition day. We are going to talk about opposition day imminently, so rest assured if you don't quite get it yet. It is usually moved by opposition front bench, but sometimes it is moved by a back bench, but most of the time it is always in the name of opposition front bench. Finally, backbencher MPs can bring a substantial motion to the House through, by and with the permission of the Backbench Business Committee. We are not going to talk about it now. So, just to sum up. A motion is substantive if it calls for action or expresses an opinion. Next lines just talk about what I talked last slide, regarding how MPs can bring substantive motions into the House of Commons main chamber. Next 3 lines talk about amendment, which we will come back later. Now we move on to our second topic, which is amendment. The amendment is used to alter the main substantive motion. The official definition given by UK Parliament is that an amendment is a change to the wording of a bill or a motion that is proposed by an MP or member of the House of Lords. So we have an example here. Let's say that a government minister tabled a motion that this House loves to eat orange. This is a substantive motion and can be amended. Note that there are procedures on tabling a motion and amendment, but we are not going into it today. Just note that you can't just table a motion or amendment whenever you want, there are steps that you will have to take. And let's say that there are 4 amendments tabled as you can see here. You can amend the motion by inserting, or leave out, you can even amend the whole motion like in Amendment D, given that it's still relevant and follow the rules. In practice, amendment is not made by just simply put a new written motion. You have to explicitly state how will you do it as shown here. We are going to move on as this is not really important to us today. We are not going to stay in this slide very long, just to show you that there are rules regarding amendment as I said earlier. If you are interested you can pause. All information will also be in the link in description. Just to say that the amendment must be relevant to the original motion, not achieve the same effect as voting against the motion, not be unintelligible, ungrammatical, vague, or mocking. For example here, as you can see, the amended motion is completely irrelevant and therefore unacceptable. However, sometimes it is not clear-cut as the previous slide. It is subjective and so it's subject to the chair or the speaker interpretation. Another thing to know is that the speaker is not obliged to select your amendments or any other amendments. You can table an amendment and put it on an official record, but it doesn't mean that it will be selected to be moved in the main debate chamber. It is entirely on his own discretion. However, he is expected to be impartial and used common sense. Basically, the way he select amendments is governed by unwritten precedents and conventions. He can't simple select or not select an amendment just because he hate or love certain party or certain member. So, let's jump back to that slide. This line talks about tabling an amendment. The 4th line talks about amendment selection that we just discussed. And then the last but not least line, actually far from least. This line denotes a very important concept that we are going to talk about very soon. It is important to understand this in order to understand the reason and rationale of the standing order number 31, which is what we are going to talk about later, and ultimately the chaos that erupted during the Gaza ceasefire debate. To sum up before moving on, let's say that a government minister has tabled a substantive motion. You tabled an amendment and debate of the motion is starting now. Note that most of the time, government substantive motion is a legislative motion as they not just only want to talk about the issue, but they also want it to become law. So, it will be in the form of bill, second reading, third reading, etc. First, the Speaker will call an MP to move the substantive motion. In this case, it will be the government front bench who tabled the motion in his name or his boss name. In practice, the Speaker will start with "I now call the Minister or whoever responsible for to move the motion." The Minister will then, at a dispatch box say, "I beg to move that something something," and the debate starts.
Minister to move the second reading. I call the Secretary of State. Is it Minister? Continue. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. Britain is the first major economy to halve its emissions. That is an
At the end of his or her speech, the Speaker will say the question out loud again, but this doesn't mean that the vote is going to happen now. He just reiterate the motion.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Ed Miliband.
Second, given that your amendment is selected, when you are called to speak, you can move the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I move the amendment standing in the name of my right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition, my name and other honourable friends.
Third, at the end of your speech, the Speaker will propose the amendment to the House. For example, the question is that the amendment D be made. The debate now become whether the amendment should be made to the main motion rather than the main motion itself. However, in practice, the main motion is also discussed.
The original question was that the bill be now read a second time, since when an amendment has been proposed as on the order paper. The question is that the amendment be made. Alok Sharma.
Because at the end of the debate, the vote is made following one another. Next, I am going to show you the same procedure again.
Minister to move the second reading. I call the Secretary of State. Is it the Minister? Continue. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. Britain is the first major economy to halve its emissions. That is an incredible this bill to the House.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Ed Miliband.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I move the amendment standing in the name of my right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition, my name and other honourable friends. Mr. Deputy Speaker, before I address the legislation, I urge the House to support our reasoned amendment and vote against their bill tonight.
The original question was that the bill be now read a second time, since when an amendment has been proposed as on the order paper. The question is that the amendment be made. Alok Sharma.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I refer the House to my register of members' interests. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I agree.
And now we arrived at a critical point. At the end of the debate, the Speaker put a question that the amendment be made first, before the main motion.
Right, OK, moving on. The original question was that the bill be now read a second time, since when an amendment has been proposed as on the order paper. The question is that the amendment be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. No.
The House will vote whether the main motion should be amended as the proposed amendment. If the House agrees, the main motion is amended. If the House rejects, the main motion is not amended and stand as it originally is.
The ayes to the right, 209. The noes to the left, 292.
Thank you. The ayes to the right, 209. The noes to the left, 292. So the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlocked.
And finally, the Speaker will put the final question on the main motion. If the motion was amended, then the question will be on the motion as amended. If it was not amended, then the question will be on the motion as originally tabled.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. No. Division, clear the lobby. Order. Order.
The ayes to the right were 293, the noes to the left were 211.
Thank you. The ayes to the right, 293, the noes to the left, 211. So the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Unlock.
I created a flow chart to help us to visualize what I just talked. Let's say that the main motion is that this House loves to eat orange. And the Amendment D was selected that this House should be inclusive and love all fruits. And now we have reached the end of the debate, and the Speaker is about to put questions. First, he will ask the House whether Amendment D should be made to the main motion. If the House agree, then the main motion is amended. Finally, the question will be whether the House agree with the main motion as amended. If the House agree, then the main motion as amended is adopted as the resolution. If the House reject, then no motions are adopted. Note that this is very rare. Because when people vote for the amendment, they also intend to pass the main motion as amended. If the motion as amended is rejected, then there is no point to vote for an amendment at the first place. If the Amendment D is rejected by the House, then the main motion is not amended. And finally, the question will be whether the House agree with the main motion as originally proposed. If the House agrees, then the motion is adopted as originally proposed. If the House rejects, then no motions are adopted. However, usually if it is the government motion, it always ends in resolution adopted as original. Given that the amendment is tabled by someone else and not the government itself. Okay, let's see for example. Let's say that this main motion is very, very important for the government. Dead important. Government issues 3 lines whip to the MP, and let's say no one is defying the whip. What's gonna happen? First, the Speaker put the question to the amendment whether it should be made. Of course, the government will want to reject it because they want to have their own motion passed unamended and unscathed, so they will force MPs to vote no, and they will win because they have a majority. Right? This is a basic concept. Being government means you should have a majority. And then the House proceed to vote whether the main motion as originally worded and tabled be made. The government will now forcing their MP to vote yes. And this is usually the case even without 3 lines whip. It usually ended up this way for government's substantive motion. And please remember this, we are coming closer to the light of what was the reason behind the chaos. Now we reach the third and final topic, which is the opposition day and the nuances behind the twist of Standing Order number 31. In order to understand this, let me skip to the next slide, and then we will come back. Usually, in the Parliament, the government gets to dictate and decide what business to be going on when it is sitting, and this is handled by the Leader of the House. This means they can decide what motion to bring in, what debates on each day are going to be about, or when each department will give answers to the House. However, note that there are also certain fixed schedule that they have to follow. So, with this concept, it is hard for the opposition to propose subject matter of the debate. This is why we opposition day. In general, 20 days in each session are set aside for debates on subjects the opposition choose. The Leader of the Opposition gets 17 days, which is now the Labour Party. The other 3 days are allocated to the third largest party in the House, which is the SNP. So, this allows the opposition to bring in substantive motion without having to go through the government. However, this leads to the next question that the government is holding the majority. Even if they bring their own motion to debate and if the government doesn't like it, the government will just use the majority to amend the main motion to make the motion looks good for the government. So, aren't opposition days serve an exact opposite purpose? So let's go back to that flow chart again. But in this time, the main motion is in the name of the opposition, and let's give that the government does not like this motion. So the government table an amendment in their name. Note, sometimes government does not completely disagree with the motion if it does not make government look bad. For example, if the motion is based, like condemning Putin, government is likely to vote with the opposition or at least will not try to trash it. Coming back, government intention is to win this debate by amending the main motion, right? And pass their own motion as amended. Fast forward to the end of the debate, and according to the procedure, the amendment question is put first. And in this circumstance, government who hold the majority want to win, so they vote to agree with the amendment. If this is the case, the opposition will never be able to vote on their own motion in their very own day. Coming back to this. So, we live in a democratic society, majority should rules, we all agree. But how about the rights of minority? Can they never be heard on express their own opinion by voting on their own motion? So, in 1979, they came up with a solution. And yes, it is in this gift box. This is the Hansard recording of the debate in the 31st of October, 1979 related to the procedure of the House. The yellow highlight describes how opposition days is like that the opposition can table their own substantive motion, and the government can also table their amendment to the motion. The green highlight basically talk about the procedure of the vote at the end of the debate, that amendment motion is put before the main motion, as we delved with earlier, and that it is usually the case. The blue highlight talks about the impact of that procedure, that it gives oppositions no chance to vote on their own motion if the same procedure is followed on opposition day. And the orange highlight explore the solution of it, that instead of voting on amendment first, the original motion as tabled be vote first. And by that concept it has developed into Standing Order number 31, 2A, that they are currently using today. This gives the opposition fair chance to be able to vote on their own motion even if it is going to fail. Before we go into the specific number of the Standing Order, why don't we talk about the Standing Order itself first? Basically, Standing Order set out rules on how the House will proceed. You may have witnessed some Standing Order being explicitly used, for example, Standing Order number 43. This allows the Speaker to order MPs to withdraw from the House for disorderly conduct, like defying the chair or failing to withdraw unparliamentary languages.
Under the power given to me by Standing Order number 43, I order the honourable member to withdraw immediately from the House for the remainder of this day's sitting.
He's used to this.
Very well.
So, let's move to Standing Order number 31, specifically subsection 2A. At the start of this standing order, it talks about how amendments are handled if they are moved, which is what we talked about with that flowchart earlier. So, when amendment is moved, the question that the amendment be made is to put before the main motion. However, as you can see that there are exceptions. At the start of the subsection 2 it talk about Standing Order number 14 blah blah blah. Basically it refer to the allotted opposition day. Subsection A. Where to any substantive motion an amendment has been moved by a Minister of the Crown to blah 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 basically to amend. So, when an amendment is moved by a government frontbencher, then the debate should still be on the original motion, and at the end of the debate, the original motion should be put to vote first. As you can see, the original word stand part of the question is basically means that the question should still be on the original motion. And if the House reject the original motion, the question that amendment be made will be put afterward. So, instead of putting amendment first, the main original motion tabled by the opposition is put first. This allows the opposition to vote on their own amendment without being prevented by government's majority. Even if the vote fail, which is usually the case, at least they get to vote on their own motion. And you need to understand that sometimes it's not about passing or failing the motion. Sometimes it's about being able to have your name on an official record that you vote for your own voice, your own motion. And most of the time if it is not a legislative motion, it is not going to have any significant change, especially if the motion or matter is outside the UK. For example, if the House comes to agree that they condemn Putin for committing war crime, it doesn't mean that he is going to stop. British Parliament cannot compel other countries to follow the decision of the Parliament. The most you will get out of it is that the government will issue a response or statement within 8 weeks if I remember correctly. And the last and utmost important thing that I have to say is that by precedents and conventions, on the Opposition Day debate, only government amendment is selected. Others can table it, but won't be selected. Breaking this convention may give the Speaker dire consequence and can result in chaos as we saw on Wednesday Gaza Ceasefire Debate. So, before I explain why breaking that convention will result in chaos, let me explain the result of the Standing Order number 31 on the procedure. It is going to make more sense when we go to a flow chart, so please bear with me, or you can skip this part if you want. If the House agrees on the original motion, the motion is accepted as it is, without further consideration, and the House move on to the next business. This means that the opposition successfully pass their own motion. This usually only occurs when the government is okay with the motion proposed. If the House rejects the original motion, then the House move on to consider the amendment as the final question. This means that the opposition fails to pass their own motion, but at least they get to vote on their own motion, and the House now is moving on to vote the government amendment. If the House agrees on the government amendment, the motion as amended is adopted and the House move on. This is usually the case if the motion tabled by the opposition express an obvious attack on the government. If the House rejects the amendment, then no motions are passed. This is unusual, because either the government will not table any amendments and vote to reject the opposition motion at the first instance to dispose the opposition motion, or they will table an amendment, votes to reject the opposition at the first instance and votes to agree with their own amendment. Now, I am going to show you how things should go on the Opposition Day motion, if all the rules and precedents are followed. Make sure to notice the differences.
Yvette Cooper to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
I beg to move the motion in my name and that of the Leader of the Opposition. The motion is to restore and renew neighbourhood. We need a Labour government now.
Question is, as on the order paper, Suella Braverman move the amendment. Home Secretary.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the amendment in my name on the order paper. So let me firstly address the issue of the Hillsborough report. The Hillsborough...
The original question was as on the order paper, since when Amendment A has been proposed, also as on the order paper. The question is that the original words stand part of the question. Order. There are, as you can see, a significant number of members who wish to participate. I'm not going to put a fixed time limit on this at the moment, but my estimate is that if everybody adheres to about 6 minutes, then everybody should be accommodated on both sides of the House. It is up to colleagues whether they choose to squeeze their colleagues out or not. Colleen Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr.
There is only one party that has cut crime by 50% in the last 12 years, and it's the Conservative Party.
Just to inform the House, the question I'll be putting will be the opposition's main motion. That comes first. If that falls, then the amendment will be put. So the question is that the original words stand part of the question. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Clear the lobbies. Order. Order.
The ayes to the right, 195. The noes to the left, 309.
America. I'll pretend I didn't hear that. The ayes to the right, 195. The noes to the left, 309. So the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. So we're now coming to the government's amendment. The question is that the proposed words be there added. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No! If you're forcing a division, Mr. Bone, you must follow your voice and you must vote that way. In which case, division, clear the lobbies. Order. Order.
The ayes to the right, 308. The noes to the left, 1.
Who was it?
That was one of ours.
The ayes to the right, 308. The noes to the left, 1. So the ayes have it. Yeah. The ayes have it. Unlock.
Let's put what we just talked into practice. The left flow chart depicts the procedure as how it is usually the case. The right flow chart depicts the procedure that is supposed to be used on the opposition day, by using the provision of the Standing Order number 31. So, it is quite obvious that the motion is an obvious attack on the government. The government responded by tabling an amendment and it was selected by the Speaker. Now, the government does not want to be condemned and don't want to lose face and want to turn this situation around. They issue 3 lines whip to their MPs. This means that all MPs must attend and vote with the government. So, if the left flow chart, which is how the procedure is normally be, how is it going to be like? At the end of the debate, the Speaker put question on whether amendment to be made first. Of course, since they give 3 lines whip, they are going to win it. And this regardless of any further outcomes, the opposition will never have a chance to vote on their own motion. And if everything go as planned, the government amendment will be adopted. Now if use the provision of Standing Order number 31(2)(a), how is it going to be? At the end of the debate, the Speaker put the original motion in the name of the opposition first. And even if it fail, and I can say that it is going to fail, at least the opposition can still vote on their own motion. And at the end of the day, and everything go as planned, the government will get to adopt their own amendment. But at least MPs get to put their name on the record that they condemn the government. For example, I'm Mr. Starmer Corbyn, fictional character, get to put the name on a record that I condemn the government led by Mr. Sunak Braverman, also a fictional character, and this for some reason make them MPs feel good. This is what they want. We talked about this earlier. In some occasions, government does not table an amendment. This can be due to the fact that the motion is based and generally agreed by decent humans, like condemning Putin. Sometimes the motion is not an attack on government and they just don't care. Some occasions they yell no, but they don't go to vote no. And this lead to a division result of something like the ayes to the right 216, the no to the left 0. And we talked about this earlier as well. I am going to move on. You can pause to have a read if you want to refresh. And this is the real example of a motion that expresses an obvious attack on the government. The government responded by tabling an amendment against it. You can see that both talked about cost of livings and economy, but the main differences are on the first sentence. We spent a very long time discussing about the procedure. So now let's talk about what actually happened on the day in question. It was the third largest party opposition day. The motion was about immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Labour, the government, which is the Conservative, and the Lib Dem tabled amendments. But if you remember, on the opposition day, as per convention, only government's amendment are selected. Other group can table it to express their opinion or position, but they are not supposed to be selected. The motions were quite similar, only semantic differences. SNP, immediate ceasefire. Labour, humanitarian ceasefire. Government, Tory, humanitarian pause. And if you are interested in the motion and amendments, I will show it to you here. But we are not going to discuss about it in detail. The left side is the original motion tabled by the SNP and the left is the Labour's amendment. And this is the government's amendment. Mr. Speaker broke the precedents by selecting Labour amendment in addition to usual government's amendment only. And this angered the SNP and the government. The result of breaking the convention is that the Labour's amendment is put first, then the SNP's motion, which is the original motion, and then the government. By doing this, SNP's motion is compromised should the House agreed on Labour's amendment. This ultimately caused SNP to not be able to vote on their own motion in their very own day. Shall we put the event into our flow chart? If the convention was not broken, there would be only SNP motion and government's amendment, and it can follow the right flow chart, which is the provision of the Standing Order number 31-2A that is used on the opposition day. Regardless of the outcome, the day's owner, the SNP, will be able to vote on their very own motion. However, the Labour's amendment was also selected, and this forced the House to use the left flow chart, which is the normal procedure outside the opposition day. Which means that if the House vote to pass Labour's amendment, the SNP and the government can never get to vote on their own motion. You and many others may have questioned that what is the deal, because the thing is, Labour is not the government as they do not have majority. If people, which is the Tory and the SNP, vote against Labour's amendment, they will be able to vote on their own motion. But the thing is, voting against Labour's amendment means voting against ceasefire for people who don't know the procedure, even if they intend to vote for the SNP's motion, which actually call for more abrupt and more rapid ceasefire. And this can be used against them by their political opponents and/or violent extremists outside who are threatening their life. If you watch from the start to this point, you will know that this is so dangerous and misleading. People who don't know the parliamentary procedure will assume or will be easily convinced that those MPs who vote against Labour's amendment do not want ceasefire, which is not the case. I think that this is the downside of having procedure that is so complicated and hard for general public to understand, and can be used as a weapon or misinformation. However, the complexity of it makes the Parliament to be able to keep members of more than 1,000 to be in order. As a result of all of these, SNP members and some Tory were very angry. The leader of the SNP in Westminster said that SNP's day has now become Labour's day.
The reality is that you were warned by the clerks of the House that your decision could lead to the SNP not having a vote on our very own Opposition Day. As a result, we have seen the SNP Opposition Day turn into a Labour Party Opposition Day. I'm afraid that that is treating myself and my colleagues in the Scottish National Party with complete and utter contempt. And I will take significant convincing that your position is not now intolerable.
To make matter even worse, the Speaker was warned by the Clerk of the House that this could happen as highlighted. He even cited the debate on 1979 that we talked before. To make it even more worse, this is an open letter and MPs know that he was warned before that this could happen. Before the vote take place, the government announces that they will not move the motion. But this doesn't change the fact that Labour's amendment was to be put first, compromising the SNP's motion. Labour frontbench, with great audacity, accused the government of being unable to control their MP. In my opinion, I think this is very disgraceful, given the current situation. It's not about Tory defying whip or the government not being able to control their own MPs. The fact is that some MPs' life are at stake, they are being threatened by violence outside the Parliament to vote in certain way. Some of them for sure will have to defy the whip and vote with Labour in order to protect their life and their family. They could not vote with their own opinion guided by their constituents. I think that this is undemocratic and a serious contempt to the Parliament. However, this is going to be a topic of another day. Anyway, the leader of the Out citing the reason that they were protecting minority rights, which the SNP doesn't seem to oppose it. Here's what happened in order. At the start of the debate, the Speaker announced that he selected both government and Labour's amendment. And this is the break of convention as we talked earlier.
I have therefore decided to select the amendments both in the name of the Prime Minister and in the name of the Leader of the Opposition. Because the operation of Standing Order number 31 will prevent another amendment from being moved after the Government has moved its amendment. I will exceptionally call the Opposition frontbench spokesperson to move their amendment at the beginning of the debate. Once the SNP spokesperson have moved their motion, at the end of the debate, the House will have an opportunity to take a decision on the official opposition amendment. If that is agreed to, there is a final question on the main motion as amended. If the official opposition amendment is not agreed to, I will call the Minister to move the government amendment formally.
Mini chaos arose at this time. One MP shouted the desire to bring back his predecessor, bring back Bercow. The chaos was not as worse as the evening though, most of them still had no idea of the consequence of the Speaker's decision.
Which restricts order! Order! You'll be going and not be voting. Well, that's the first one to leave then. If you want to, do it. No then.
The main chaos erupted toward the end of the debate, starting when the Leader of the House raised a point of order and informed the House that the government will not move the amendment.
It also appears from the advice of his clerk that the decision is taken against the long-standing and established processes and procedures of this House, and that the consequences may be that government is not able to respond to opposition day motions, and as such, the government does not have confidence that it will be able to vote on its own motion. For that reason, the government will play no further part in the decision this House takes on today's proceedings. And that, regrettably, Mr. Speaker has inserted himself into that row with today's decision and undermined the confidence of this House in being able to rely on its long-established standing orders to govern its debates. Long-established conventions that should not be impaired by the current view of a weak leader of the opposition and a divided party. I would ask, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would ask that the Speaker take the opportunity to reassure all honourable and right honourable members that their Speaker, our Speaker, will not seek to undermine those rights in order to protect the interests of particular members, and that future Opposition Day debates will not be hijacked in this way. And I say this, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the benefit of all members.
MPs started to realise the consequence of having two amendments selected. This means that Labour's amendment will be put to vote first, instead of the owner of the day, which is the SNP's motion. MPs were worried because if they want to vote for the SNP's motion, which call for more rapid ceasefire, they will have to vote against the Labour's amendment, which also call for a ceasefire. If they vote against Labour's amendment, they can be accused by opponents, conspiracy theorists, or people who don't know the parliamentary procedure that they vote against and therefore don't want ceasefire.
I believe that today the SNP have been treated unfairly. But it's not just the SNP that have been treated unfairly, because those of us who would like to vote for the SNP motion, now if we want to do so, must vote against a Labour Party motion, a motion which the Honourable Member for the Rhondda just said would lead, if we voted for it, to an immediate general election. So we are being placed in an unfair position if we wish to support the SNP motion. Now, this afternoon we've now seen the exit of the SNP from the chamber and the exit of many people on this side of the House too. We're clearly in an intolerable situation, and it's a sad situation, Madam Deputy Speaker. I believe the current Speaker is a man of honour, and he's done a great deal over recent years to restore the reputation of the Chair after a period that was a dark period for this House. However, even if he believes that the constitutional innovation that he's introducing today is a good one, today, at this moment, was not the time to change the rules. You've heard from the Chair of the Select Committee there is a serious question about the order here and the constitutional propriety of which order these questions are being taken, a question being put by the SNP too. And can I suggest that if you're not prepared to suspend the House, that we at least defer the divisions that are supposed to be happening this evening until we can resolve these issues? And as a final point, because in this House it is courteous and traditional that the person who you are talking about is always there when they are discussed, that we should defer those divisions so that we can hear from the Speaker himself before we come to vote on these issues, because otherwise I believe a great injustice is being done to the SNP, but other members as well of this House.
People are frightened. People have weaponised this debate in this chamber. Whips are frightened for their flocks. They are frightened for their flocks because members of Parliament now feel that they have to vote in a certain way to safeguard their safety and the safety of their family. This is a far bigger issue than the debate we're having tonight, because if people are changing their votes in this place or changing their behaviours in this place because they're frightened what may happen to them or their families out there, then we have a real problem. So this point scoring off each other is not going to resolve many issues.
As a result, chaos erupted, and points of order after points of order were being raised. MPs were conspiring about the reason behind his ruling. Other MPs demand to see the Speaker and want to question his ruling. The person who was in the chair was Deputy Speaker Winterton.
Where on earth is the Speaker of the House of Commons? How do we bring him to that seat to explain? How do do we bring him to this House now to explain to the Scottish National Party why our views and our votes in this House are irrelevant to him?
It seems that the Speaker of the House of Commons was put under intolerable pressure. The BBC Newsnight political editor, Nicholas Watt, tweeted that senior Labour figures tell me that the Commons Speaker was left in no doubt that Labour would bring him down after the general election unless he called Labour's Gaza amendment. That was a Labour figure told him that. I don't say rubbish. That was a Labour figure. Madam Deputy Speaker, can you assure the House that everything will be done to identify who it was that put that intolerable pressure on the House of Commons Speaker?
Point of order, Dr. Matthew Ufford.
Madam Deputy Speaker, where is the Speaker?
One MP moved that the House would sit in private, means press will be kicked out and no Hansard record except votes. Labour MPs were taunting the Govs and SNP bench and adding fuel to the fire. They knew that it was wrong, but they were so complacent with it. We talked about this earlier, just to reiterate you all again. Even if the SNP motion pass, yes, it expressed the opinions of British Parliament, British public on behalf of their MPs. It is unlikely that it will cause significant change, especially if the matter is outside the UK. For example, the House passed the motion to condemn Putin. Doesn't mean that he is going to stop the war, or the House passed the motion to condemn China for coal power plant pollution doesn't mean that they are going to stop it. Voting allows MPs to voice their opinion and put on a record publicly that they agree or disagree with motions. Government will issue response or statements, but overall nothing is going to change. Now, lastly, why did they care so much to vote either with Labour or the SNP? I think I am just echoing my point at this point now. 1. General election is coming, and they hate that Keir Starmer is using this as an opportunity to regain some votes that he lost from his flip-flop tendency. 2. SNP want to vote on their own motion and doesn't want to associate themselves with Labour, nor doesn't want this to be an opportunity for Labour to campaign for voters. 3. Still differences in semantic details. And finally, we talked about this earlier. For if MPs want to genuinely vote for the SNP's motion, they will have to vote against Labour's motion. This action will allow political opponent to accuse them that they are against ceasefire and want more bloodshed. The Speaker faces a serious backlash. Now there is at least 71 signatories on an early day motion that this House has no confidence in Mr. Speaker. The motion are signed by both Tory and SNP MPs. Most of you will know that it is rare-sighted to see the Tory and the SNP to sign something together. The Speaker cited the motive behind breaking convention is that he wants everyone to be able to express opinions, and he apologised several times for his own mistake. Disagreement among Tory MPs, some Tory like the Speaker and support him, others want him out. There is a claim that a senior Labour staff blackmailed the Speaker into selecting Labour's amendment. But many believes that this is false statement and currently there are no proofs. The more generally accepted theory is that he fears for the life and well-being of all MPs and that compelled him to break the convention. If this is true, it is utterly appalling and the Speaker is another victim of extremism. This is a serious contempt of Parliament and democracy. Parliament and the elected representative must be able to freely express their opinions. No one in the history of Great Britain get away with defying the authority of the Parliament. Even the King could not, or else aka Charles I. If the head of the state, if the King is not allowed to defy the Parliament, why would we allow violence and extremism to defy it? Another theory is that Keir Starmer told the Speaker that Starmer himself is in trouble in his flip-flop. His MPs are rebelling and he needed his MPs to vote on his wording instead of the SNP's wording. And this is the early day motion of no confidence in the Speaker. Thank you if you are still watching to this point. And I hope that this video helped you to understand the event better and the parliamentary procedure in general. I may do a commentary video on the video of the incident if this video receive good engagement. The thing is that making this is actually time-consuming and take quite an effort, but I am committing to it.